Good morning. Today is 23 January, the year 2007. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today I'm here at the museum and have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Flying Officer Frank Rowan. Officer Rowan was a Lancaster Navigator for the Rcaf in Europe during World War II. So we're going to talk to him about that and a lot of other things. Frank, nice to have you here.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, would you please state and spell your full name for us, please?
My name is Frank Thomas Rowan, R-O-W-A-N.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Ottawa, Canada, on the 25th of September, 1921.
1921. And what was your father's name?
James Thomas
Okay, Rowan.
Rowan.
Okay, and how did he end up in Canada? Where did your ancestors all come from?
My ancestors came from Ireland on my dad's side, but then my dad was born in Woodstock, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And from a very early age, he lost his parents in an accident. And he and a brother and sister then traveled to Canada and were raised by uncles and aunts that lived in Ottawa.
I see. And what part of Ireland was the ancestors from?
County Mayo.
County Mayo. Okay. Have you ever been there?
No.
Okay.
I've been to Ireland, but not
the
there.
County Mayo. And your mother, what was her name and her maiden name?
Valeda, V-A-L-E-D-A. She was French Canadian.
Oh.
So this was some upbringing, and we were, all of us, myself and my siblings, were all raised in both languages.
Oh, okay. And what did her father do?
Her name, Valeda Cardinal, C-A-R-D-I-N-A-L.
What kind of work?
She was born and raised in Ottawa.
Oh, she was in Ottawa. Okay. Did her ancestors come from France or were they French Canadian? Or they come
They're
to
French
Quebec?
Canadians of quite some generations in Canada.
Did they live in Quebec for a long time before they came to Ottawa? Or?
Mainly in Ottawa, which is right on the border with Quebec.
Oh, okay.
Right up. Yeah.
And Ottawa is the capital.
The capital.
Right.
Yes.
What's the population of Ottawa? About.
It wasn't very large at that time, but today it's not a very big, maybe 250,000 or so.
Why did they choose Ottawa to be the capital? Do you know?
And there were three cities that were provided to the Queen at that time. The Queen of England decided
Right.
that. I think Toronto and Montreal,
Yeah.
and Ottawa was in the center of that.
Oh.
Why? But that was chosen at that time.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of work did your father do?
My dad became a court reporter in marine law, and he took the minutes of the first investigation when the sinking of the Titanic,
Oh.
then the famous Halifax explosion in 1917, and the sinking of the Empress of Ireland and the St. Lawrence with 1,200 people, and he subsequently became Dominion Wreck Commissioner, that whenever there were marine accidents within Canada, that he would oversee the investigations.
That Halifax, that was a ship that that exploded, right? And
There was a ship, a French vessel, that had armaments and explosives aboard, and it was struck by another ship by accident in the harbor of Halifax.
Oh, okay. Because I think there was a rumor. Well, maybe the Germans had blown it up or something.
No.
But it was really was an accident.
Big explosion.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is Ottawa, is that on one of the lakes, or is there?
No, it's on Ottawa River, and the river. Yeah, we can cross the border to Hull. The buses and streetcars, it's like two cities. That's right, Quebec and.
What's right across from Ottawa? Did you say?
Well, city they had a different name at today. They call it the Gatineau area now.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But that's in Quebec. Yeah. Okay. All right. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I had 2 brothers and 3 sisters.
And what were their names?
My older brother's name was John. My second brother, Morris, is still alive. Old. He's 92 now.
Oh.
And I have one sister left, my youngest sister, was Marguerite, Cecile, and then Helen.
Mm-hmm. And was your family very religious? Did you go to church a lot when you were a kid?
Yes, quite a bit.
Where did you go? What church did you go to?
A Catholic school, parish. Yeah.
Yeah. What was? Do you remember the parish?
But you know, my dad was Irish. There was an Irish church as well, a small community at that time. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Did you go to a Catholic grammar school?
At school, all of us did our primary school in French.
Mm-hmm.
All of us did our high school in English.
Oh.
And at university, we could choose.
Uh-huh.
My older brother, John, for example, did that procedure. He graduated as an engineer at the university in Montreal, French.
Mm-hmm.
Then he went to MIT and graduated to a doctorate in engineering in English.
That's great. Do you still speak French?
Yes.
Do you? Uh-huh.
My wife is French speaking, and so we speak both of them.
Sure, yeah. Now you grew up during the Depression. Did Canada, were they affected as much by the Depression as the United States, do you think? And did it?
Perhaps, but not as much. We had a much smaller population.
Mm-hmm.
There was less than 9 million Canadians at that time.
Yeah.
So much smaller cities than that.
So your dad, he had a job all during the Depression, pretty much?
Yes, with the federal government.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now you had, was your school system like we have here, 12-year, or after your 12th grade in high school, you graduate?
You go high school, and then high school you can go to
college
university.
or university. What year did you, do you remember the high school that you went to?
Yes, in a small Jesuit college in Kingston, Ontario, yes.
Okay. And what was the name of that?
Regiopolis.
Okay. And did you play sports when you were growing up? What did you kids do for fun?
Yes, very active in sports.
Like what? What did you?
Oh, we skated a lot, and so played hockey, played football.
Did you
But we had a gym, and I was a boarding school, so we did practice a lot of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some teachers that were American who had played basketball.
Mm.
And I dare say we did.
Well, you're pretty tall. How tall were you then?
Yeah, I guess just a little 5'11", something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah. So was that your favorite sport, basketball, do you think?
Yes, and I really enjoyed that, yeah.
And what classes did you like? Did you have certain classes that you liked really well?
No, I had a general, we had history, we had chemistry, algebra, and various languages and that like that.
But which did you like the best of those?
Oh, history and reading, and yes, I did.
Yeah. And so you had Jesuit priests that were your
yes,
teachers?
primarily, yes.
Yeah. Were they pretty strict?
Yeah, they're strict, but they were good. Set good examples. I mean, yeah. When I look back at some of the things they did were very, very, very good. But growing up at that age and all that elements of it, they were very, very good.
So what year did you graduate from high school then?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Let's see, you were born in... What date were you born again?
1921.
21? So probably around 1939, maybe something
Yeah,
like
that's
that?
right, yeah,
Okay.
about that time.
Okay. So then, did you go on to college right away?
Yes, yeah, university.
Oh,
And after the first year, I was there 1 year, and then I joined up.
okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. Do you remember? Okay, that's what you're in Canada. Do you remember September 1, 1939?
Yes.
When
just-
Hitler went into Poland.
Yes.
Yeah,
Read in the paper and all that.
and when England got involved with it. Were you up on current affairs? Did you know what was going on in Europe pretty much in those days, or?
No, unless we read in the paper, not like TV today or seen it in those days. But I remember a lot of things in the paper, but not so much that.
Did Canada become involved in the war the same time England did?
Yes, at the same time.
Very same time.
Yeah.
And so you knew
Oh, yes,
you were
yes.
at war.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went into which university did you go to first?
In Ottawa, the University of Ottawa.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
An English part of it called St. Patrick's College, but graduate from the University of Ottawa.
Okay. And did you have a major?
No,
Just
arts at that time.
So what did you do after that first year?
I joined up.
Oh, you did? Okay. And had you been interested in aviation prior to this?
No, not particularly. More sports than anything else.
Okay. And so you joined the RCAF then?
CAF.
And why did you choose them?
We were 6 or 7 friends that did sports, and we finished early school, and we didn't have anything until September. And one said we suggest joining up, which we did, and we marched up to the recruiting station and
Yeah.
came home and certainly surprised my mother.
Yeah. But did they have a draft in Canada?
No.
Like they didn't have
All
like-
volunteer.
Oh, it was all volunteer, yeah. And so where did you go for your basic training then?
Near Montreal, a place called La Chine, Quebec, for basic training. And then I did a number of bases in various stages in eastern Canada, and then Quebec City, and from there then went out in western Canada, quite a long ways away, just on a base in Saskatchewan, north of Montana,
Oh, yes.
near the Montana border.
Had you wanted to be a pilot when you joined?
Yeah, definite, but I guess in their evaluation, or depending what they needed or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too long before they started training you as a navigator?
Yes.
Okay. And what
Yeah, starting like as an observer,
Mhm.
so that could fit into smaller aircraft. So courses on wireless and bombing and gunnery, and different schools that we went to.
Right. So when did you? Well, when you went to Saskatchewan, what were you doing there?
That was a bombing and gunnery school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then from there, where did you go?
From there, I went to a big school in Saskatchewan, in Manitoba, which was navigation.
Navigation. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was that like?
Well, it was a lot more work, a lot simpler than what they have today.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the various ways that you navigated and how you did it.
Ours were all trained for night flying.
Oh, okay. That's right, because they were
Yeah,
flying.
so
the
much
bombing at night,
much
that's right.
different
Yeah.
than the system here.
Yeah. So you couldn't.
And that was before G and everything, and taking a lot of more
Right. Yeah. You took fixes on the stars if you could. If
Yes, fixes on the stars. And
Yeah. Stars. And so when did you get assigned to a crew and to a plane?
so then when we're posted in the UK, we continued training, and then at one stage, all types of trades come together, and then an RAF, a peacetime RAF officer, came and asked me if I would join his crew, and I said yes. And he was a peacetime officer, wing commander. And
So he had been in for quite a long time. In the
yes, I
service.
said prior to the war.
Right.
He was a radar specialist.
Mm.
He had graduated at MIT
Oh.
and had served in Gibraltar and Singapore.
So when you went overseas, did you fly over? How did you get over to England?
By ship.
Oh, by ship, you did. Was it a convoy? Was there problems with German submarines and stuff? Or
No. It was one of the bigger ships that could go much faster, so they did it by themselves. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
But you did see the odd destroyer from time to time.
Yeah. Where? So where was your base in England?
In training, or when I was in a squadron?
Well, both. Let's say both. Yeah.
In the squadron was in Lincolnshire, just north of Lincoln,
Okay.
in the middle of England, and that was an RAF, mainly RAF
Base.
base.
And
That's
what-
where mainly Bomber Command was.
Right. And that was what year did you get there?
44 and all
1944.
of 44 and then part of 45.
Okay. Now, were the Americans there too at that base also, or was it all British?
Near, but they were in the southern part of the.
Right.
Yeah.
And so by this time, it was what they call bombing around the clock. The British would bomb at night, and the Americans during the day.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And you got assigned to Lancaster.
Yes.
Okay. We've got one over here. Let me give you this little pointer here. Here. Why don't you take this, and I'll let you point out some of the particulars on the plane. How many in the crew?
Seven.
7. And where would they be, and what were they?
They're the rear gunner, mid-upper gunner, the pilot, an engineer, a bomb aimer, and a navigator.
Okay. Yeah. And what kind of armament did it have?
Oh, here the turrets here with ammunition.
50 caliber, I suppose.
Yeah, but not much.
Yeah, you don't have that many.
But certainly heavy bombs.
Yes.
Every bomb load.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, at night, that was why you were flying at night. The German fighters weren't as. I mean, they had night fighters, I know, but.
But we went on very long trips.
Yeah. And what kind of bomb load would they carry? How many bombs, or do you remember?
It varied, huh? So we had one big one sometimes.
Yeah.
Other times.
Yeah. And they had the insignia along the side there. You got the roundel, I know, and the DRM. Like what would that signify? Or QRM, I guess it is.
We didn't have them like that. We'd have something up here, but we never had them
like that. Yeah. I mean, I've read books about, and they would be like S for sugar, M for
Oh yes,
stuff like
Able, and yeah, they were all
something
with one
like
letter.
that with letters.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember? Did you have the same Lancaster for all your missions? Did you find
No.
you would be different ones?
The pilot that I had on my first tour had already done a tour of 30 trips. So the second tour I did 20 with him. Then I joined with another crew.
Uh-huh.
And then they had a problem with one of theirs, and then a subsequent one. So that's why I was on more than 30 trips.
So how many missions did you fly?
35.
35. And we'll get into this, I'm sure, but you were shot down at
Yes,
some point in time. Well, let's get back to tell me about your first mission and what the feeling was like and what you were thinking at the time.
Oh, I was quite confident flying with a pilot who had done 30 trips.
Right.
So you can imagine I was excited to see what and to make sure that what I had in training worked out.
Yes.
But as a navigator, you hardly see anything.
Mm-hmm.
You're just in a cabin covered around with the instruments and everything. It's not like these people or the others seeing the ground or seeing the air.
Okay. So you're watching the instruments. The instruments tell you where you are, pretty much.
Hopefully.
Right.
And taking account of the wind and the
Yes.
various changes and that.
Right. Yeah. What was the name of your squadron?
The number was 170.
170.
Yeah.
Okay. And was it all Lancasters?
Yes, and at the end they had a bigger version of that they call a Lincoln.
Oh, okay.
But all Lancasters.
Okay. And I think Avro, they made the Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
So what time would you take off to go on your missions usually?
Early evening or something else like that. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Would it still be light out, or was it usually dark when you took off?
Yes, depending where you were located in England or in the continent. And you would meet primarily over one city in Reading.
Oh, okay.
And from that go in different directions.
And how long would your missions usually last?
I had them some 6.5 up to 10 hours.
Mm-hmm.
9 hours I had, 8 hours and 50 deep parts. And
Now you see in the movies and stuff, at least in the American ones I've seen, I'm assuming that prior to your mission, you would all meet and they would tell you where you're running.
the briefings.
The briefing and all that stuff.
Briefings, yeah.
And that would be like in the afternoon?
In the afternoon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And so you usually would get back like early in the morning or...
Yeah, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. And
So literally in the dark all the time.
Do you remember your first mission?
No, not particularly. You're working so much.
Yeah. But, I mean, do you remember where you went on your first mission?
On the Rhine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And
In Krefeld or something. I forget.
yeah. Which were some missions more dangerous than others to go on?
Oh, once we were in, most of them, on the plane were watching for other aircraft.
So you
There are quite a few in that. So once we were collided another aircraft that took about most beyond the starboard right wing, took all that part off our aircraft.
Oh, you did had you had a mid-air collision?
Yeah.
Oh. Where was that?
Oh,
Was still
past the Rhine.
Oh.
And we dropped to maybe 4,000 or 5,000 feet. And then we decided to pick some city and by ourselves went over it and dropped the bombs, rather than trying to fly back and drop them over the Rhine.
You're right, yeah. And so, did it knock out an engine too, or just knock part of the wing?
No.
But
the stability and I guess the fuel, I'm not sure what the...
Yeah. But you made it back home, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would think that mid-air collision would be more when you were forming up in England, when the planes were all, how did this happen?
Yeah, and well, also the bombing, over the bombing area, you were timed at different times, at different heights.
Uh-huh.
So I've seen, or our crew saw other aircrafts hitting into each other and coming down.
Mm.
Some places were a lot worse than others.
Did you ever have to deal with German night fighters?
No.
Okay.
Some others did.
Yeah.
Then you had to try to evade them with doing corkscrew operations.
Mm-hmm. And so flak was the main thing you had to worry about.
Flak or collisions
Car
with
collision.
others, and then,
Yeah.
in our case, eventually night fighters
Oh.
over certain cities. If they could detect what the target was going to be,
And they'd be waiting for
they'd
you.
be there.
So, okay, you got the wing. Did you take any battle damage other than the time you were shot down on any of your other flights, missions?
Oh, one badly damaged, but it was already on the ground. So total darkness over the UK. And when we'd arrive over our base, we would circle, and then they would light the runway, and we would come in very quickly, one after the other. What happened, as we were about to land, the aircraft ahead of us on the runway, suddenly we saw a big explosion. Apparently they had incendiaries that were stuck on the bomb door. And when they opened, they hit the runway. So immediately they yelled bandit, and they turned off the lights. So we immediately landed and turned off the runway. And we survived that. I don't know how we did, because we bounced it across the dark or where we'd stop, and over Nissen huts. And
Yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
so there were many accidents at times.
Were you pretty religious still when you were over there?
Yeah, pretty well.
Going to mass and stuff?
Yeah.
Do you think that helped in coping with?
It didn't hurt, but I mean, in your confidence and
Yeah.
feeling if something happened to you, I guess.
And your crew, you said you had a different pilot. Did you have crew members that you stayed together with pretty much most of the time, or? I guess what I'm getting at is how did the crew work together? I mean,
Very well.
Right. Yeah.
We had primarily most of the time one from Australia, and we had one from New Zealand on the different flights. Some from the UK. Yeah, they were mixed crews.
But you felt you could depend on
Oh yes,
every crew
yeah,
member,
yeah.
right? Yeah. And your training was, I know here in this, I mean, most of people feel that they survived one reason because their training was so good and they just automatically did what needed to be done. And
Yeah, I believe
your
that was
ticket
good. Yeah, they were
same.
trained very well in that short time on that period of time.
Right. Okay, well, tell me about your last mission then.
The target was Nuremberg, and I guess shortly after we dropped the bombs, coming out of that area, the aircraft was hit, I guess, from night fighters. And from then on, I mean, that happens very, very quickly, and there's an example. The crew worked very well then.
Where'd you get hit? What kind of damage did it take?
I don't know.
Was it?
That they were able to hold the plane, but it was evident that it was badly hit. The pilot held the plane, and
Was anybody injured or wounded?
yeah, one. Oh yes, a few of them. I was, and a few others.
Oh, you were. What happened? To you?
Oh, that. No, you bail out. I bailed out, and
But I mean, were you hit before
No,
you bailed
no,
out?
no,
Oh,
no,
okay,
no.
okay, all right. So the pilot, how do you know to bail out? The pilot's.
he
what is
told
it?
us to bail
He's
out
a-
right away. Yeah.
And so you knew. And so let's take a look at this. Go back to this plane again. Where were you again in the plane?
In behind here, right in
Okay.
here.
And where would you
And I
be?
bailed out here,
Okay. All
and
right.
some others are there, but out right here under the.
Was the plane on fire at the time? Do you remember?
I can't.
Don't know. Yeah. Okay. And
We were about 21,000 feet when we got hit, and I estimated that it was coming down on the slope. I bailed out about 18,000 feet.
Okay. And you had a chest pack in those days. What was your parachute
Most
like?
of, yeah, I was sitting on mine.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, some of them had it here, and
Oh, okay. And did it have like a pilot chute that would bring it? So yours opened okay and everything for you?
yes, it opened.
That's always, yeah. And is the parachute black if you're at night, or is it white, or do you remember?
White, I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. And where did you land?
I was very, very fortunate. I landed on a runway at a night fighter squadron.
Oh my gosh.
Otherwise, I'm sure I wouldn't be alive today.
Because could be trees, or you mean because of the who captured you? That perhaps,
Yes, primarily.
because
by
the
Air Force people.
Yeah, because the civilians may have just killed you. Is that
Yeah,
which they
or
did?
others. Yeah.
What they did a lot of times. Okay. So, did you make a good landing? Did you get hurt in the landing?
Oh yeah, in the landing,
I mean,
we didn't have any experience of doing that, so no, I came out of it.
You didn't
quite
break a
okay.
leg or an ankle or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I had a bad knee. I didn't know what that nothing.
Okay. So were they there to get you right
Oh
away?
yes, with dogs, and they took a few shots, warning shots before I hit the ground, and
Okay.
you could see
And where did they take you then?
into their administration office. I guess I don't know.
And did they interrogate you right away?
No.
What did they do with you then?
Oh, there was some medical treatment. So a doctor came, and after a while, because when I moved off on my back somewhere, and so he put some stitches in.
Oh.
But he said he had nothing to help at that, so he just gave you a piece of thing to bite on. But I guess from the shock to your system, you don't even feel that.
Yeah. Did they speak English? Did they speak English?
Yeah, it's a little.
And so, did you spend the night there on that base?
Yes, on that
I
base.
mean, the rest of how long were you there on that base?
About 3 days.
Did
Then the next day, I guess they went around and they found, they picked up 7 or 8 others. And there were 3 members of our crew.
Oh, okay. Did everybody survive out of your crew, as far as you know?
One didn't survive, the only married individual in the crew.
Okay, so then after you're there for 3 days, then what do they do with you?
There was a brief interrogation, and then they brought me to a prisoner of war camp. And I was only there about 2 days, and then they put us on marches. We started marching, emptying the camps, and moving away, depending whether the Russians were in that region or the Americans or whatever. So
And
we
this
spent most of it on a long, long march.
What date was that you were shot down?
On St. Patrick's Day in 1945.
March
17th of March.
17th March. Okay. And how far from Nuremberg were you when you went?
About 20 miles.
Oh, okay. And how did they treat you?
It wasn't easy for them either. Huh? Terrible.
It was still
So when
pretty-
we started marching, we might have been 180 or 200. And by when we were liberated, we must have been about 4,000 from different camps.
Yeah. And was the weather still pretty bad?
It's a spring, no, it's not bad. On the second day of marching, we were strafed. And so after that, they only marched at night.
And what about food? Did you get enough food to eat?
Yeah, you would twice a day, and there would be soup and but we survived, and we did get Red Cross packages.
Did you?
Not regularly, but we did get so. So even at that stage during the war, towards the end, and they were really suffering. I mean,
The guards, were they pretty much older fellows?
older chaps, and most of them with dogs. Yeah.
And so you never were spent much time in a real concentration
No,
camp as
no.
such. You were just marching all over the place.
Yes.
Okay.
Through Bavaria.
Okay.
From Nuremberg to different cities.
And what about the civilians? How did they treat you, or did
I
they?
only saw one place.
Oh, you never really saw them. Yeah. And
The only one were in a city called Regensburg,
yeah,
famous city.
sure.
And when we had a break over an hour, we went inside the yard. And by that time I had really pulled off and on the shroud on the parachute. And my hands were cut. And it was turning black. I was sure I'd get an infection. And I noticed that one of the windows, they pulled back the curtains. And I was nearby, and I showed them my hands. And they sort of indicated to go around. So I went around, they opened the door. And I went in, there was no lights. And I think there were 5 people, older people. At least 3 ladies and 2 men. They didn't say a word. They washed my hands with hot water. They took like fat or grease, put it on and wrapped my hands. And then gave me a cloth to show how to use as a diaper to wipe myself. That's the only civilians I saw. And at that stage in the war, when you think of what they did.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, that was really.
Yeah, that's what you remember.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And so when were you liberated, so to speak? Or how
About
did that-
6 or 7 days after VE Day, by General Patton's Third Army.
And where were you then?
In the eastern part of Bavaria, near the Czech border.
How far from the Russians? Were they getting close to? You don't know.
And we saw General Patton the second day.
Oh.
The first day, they within a short time, they kept warning and warning us not to touch anything, not to go into anything, and just stay where we were. And which good reason, because a number of them, 6 of them died subsequently in the next 24 hours from booby traps or other things like that.
So you had been marching, and then in VE Day, what the Germans, did they just run away, or did they tell you, will you stay here, or how did you
No,
know
they
what to
stayed
do?
with us until we were liberated,
Oh, they
those
did.
that were. The one major event that they stopped us one morning and they got us all lined up, and that they announced the death of President Roosevelt. And to us, I mean to them, it was like a sign that maybe the Americans would give in or whatever. But to us, it was such a shock to hear that.
So
Those are the few things. As I say, when I came back, I was advised not to go near the Legion or troops. I guess what you call post-traumatic distress today.
right.
So I, other than Armistice Day, I did not attend any event until 1988. So all of that was, by that time, way back in my mind.
Yeah, so you hadn't really thought too much about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so when did you meet this pretty French lass?
Pardon?
When did you meet that pretty French lass there?
Don't you?
He's asking you, not me.
Either can
For the summers, I worked on a passenger vessel, a tourist along the St. Lawrence River,
Uh-huh.
and the vessel sailed out of Montreal and stopped at a number of ports. My first port was a city called Sorel, S-O-R-E-L, and met her. She was a native of there, and I met her at that time.
Uh-huh. And what was your maiden name then?
Goulet,
And your first name?
Anita,
Anita. Okay. And how did you spell your last name?
Goulet.
Oh, like Robert Goulet.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you sing as good as he?
No.
No. And so, and how old were you then? At the time, or what year was that?
When we met, it was 1942.
42.
Yes.
Okay.
In the summer,
Okay. And when did you get married?
1946.
Okay. So, but were you engaged or anything during the war, or you were?
Well,
I corresponded a lot. And,
no, but before he left for overseas, kind of engagement, when the soldier asked, "Would you wait for me?" I guess that's the engagement.
Yeah.
And I waited, and that's how we corresponded.
Had you thought about getting married before
No.
you went
no,
over?
no.
No, I was only 17
Oh,
when I
okay.
met him.
Okay, so did you write to each other
Oh yeah,
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time?
oh yeah, that was very important.
Yes. And what did you do after when you got out of high school during the war while he was over there?
I worked in a war plant in Sorel. We had 2 war plants in Sorel. We had the shipbuilding plant, and where I worked, it was guns.
Mhm.
And as a matter of fact, we had an American contract for, I think, is it possible, if I remember, 6-inch guns?
Six and yeah.
Could be,
Yeah.
So what did you do?
I was a secretary.
I see. Yeah. Did you have any other relatives in the service at that time?
In the service, I lost a cousin in the Air Force. He was killed in North Africa. And
Tunisia.
yeah, in Tunisia. After they loaded the plane, he had been writing to my mother, and he said they loaded the plane, and he was very funny, good humor. But apparently when they left to fly, they hit bumps. They were overloaded, and the plane exploded, and they were all killed.
Yeah.
I had cousins who lost their fiancés and things like that. But the French Canadians didn't volunteer too well in the war. So that's why I didn't have too many people who died. At one time didn't it became like my uncle?
Yeah, and latter part during the
That
war.
latter
Yeah.
part of the war, but at first they didn't want, like he was a volunteer. Air
Right,
Force were
yes.
volunteers.
I wanted to ask you about your ancestors. Did they come from France, or
Yes.
where in France did they come from?
The northern part, I believe, of France, and then Brittany,
Yes.
and they were hundreds of years ago, came to Canada.
And your father, what did he do?
My father was the personal manager at the war plant. So actually he was a person who worked in offices and management.
Okay.
He was not a tradesperson.
Okay, before the war he did that too?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
And your mother, what was her name and her maiden name?
Her maiden name was Crépeau, Germaine Crépeau. And her father was a captain. He had his own ship built in Scotland, and he was a ferry ship, but on the St. Lawrence going from one side to the other, taking people who had to work, and that was his job or his liking. And apparently, I was told, I never met him, he was an excellent swimmer. And people would get drunk before they would get on the ship, and they would fall off or jump off. And he received a decoration from the government for saving so many lives. But he got annoyed with it, and he says at one time he wouldn't go and jump anymore because he knew some of them did it on purpose.
Oh. And so was he Scottish? Was he Scotch? Was he?
No, he was French Canadian.
No, he was French Canadian too. Well, what was it? How did you spell his last name?
Crepeau, Crepeau.
Oh, okay. All right.
Crepeau.
Yeah. Okay. So now, when did you first hear that he was captured, or was missing, or what did you hear first?
He went missing on March the 17th, so a few days later. He had a brother living in Montreal who heard it from his mother, who lived in Ottawa, and they phoned me and said that he was missing.
So what was your thought at that time?
Hard to explain.
Well, I know. Okay. So when did you find out that he was alive?
Living, after the war.
Oh.
After the war was over.
You didn't even know he was a
No.
prisoner
No,
during that time?
no.
Nobody near your family?
Well, it
No,
was such a mess and so many.
it
So
was,
well after VE Day.
Oh.
yeah, May was, we heard in June. But because
Yeah.
he was a prisoner, they sent them home very quickly.
Yeah.
So he was home by the end of June, right?
Yeah.
So, what were your thoughts when you heard that he wasn't missing then? Pretty
Yeah, very happy.
I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Couldn't believe it. Yeah.
So Patton, they came and you saw Patton, you said, and so how soon did they send you back, or where did they send you from? Where they?
From where you were.
From there, we went to Reims in France, and they had an airfield with many bombers that were landing, and each one were taking prisoners back to England.
Okay.
But talking about General Patton, quite a story. He arrived in a jeep and he stood up. He must have been maybe 30 yards from where I was. So I was running. But normally you'd see photographs that he had 2 pistols.
Mm-hmm.
He only had the one. So apparently some of them asked him had he lost it. And all I remember, he said no, he had given it to Dinah Shore sometime before that.
Wow,
That's interesting.
that is.
And many years later, here we were in the valley, and we went to a little mall that had photographs and frames that we're looking
A
at.
frame store.
And they had a big frame, and in it was that revolver. And much surprised, I asked the owner. He said if you stay around this afternoon, George Montgomery will be here. He's had it done. Apparently, it's in the museum that is up at the
Patton Museum.
Patton Museum that is here.
Uh-huh.
After all those years.
I'll be darned. That is really something. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. That's quite a story.
And so that's all I said, having seen him, and then remembered that story
Yeah.
about the gun.
You should go up. Patton Museum's not far from here. It's out
Mhm.
east.
Yeah, I subsequently did visit it.
Oh, you have? And you saw the gun there?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see?
Oh, great. That's quite a story. Yeah.
No, I think I had visited before that. And
Before that, yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Small world.
It is a small
Small
world, yeah. We live at Mission Hills, and Dinah lived there too, and
Oh,
my
yeah.
wife used to play
Yeah.
golf
Golf.
with her a few times. Yes, it's really a nice lady.
She was, yeah.
Uh-huh.
When she got the,
so
we saw her one day before she
so
started
that
golfing.
is,
That's unbelievable. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
So, so they flew you back to England, and then how did you get back to Canada from England?
By on passenger ship, a big passenger ship.
see.
It was like you'd gone over, yeah. And
But they sent us back, the prisoners, I mean, before others were concerned.
right. And other than having lost a lot of weight, were you physically not too bad? Yeah.
The worst, I think, that I remember for years has been eaten by lice. I didn't know what it was at the beginning, but it's terrible.
Yeah.
So that,
Yeah.
but other than that, they kept us. But those people suffered, I guess, in that country.
Now I know a lot of people had a lot of psychological problems when they came back from things that like you went through.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a problem with that? Did you have nightmares, things like that?
No, they sent you to a rest home.
Hmm?
They sent you to a rest home for a while.
Yes.
For that reason.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they sent us to rest homes and everything else like that. And
Yeah.
And then you said that they told you not to think and talk too much about war.
not to deal with veterans, not to go to the
Right.
For a while,
veterans and all.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So just so so how soon did you get married after you got back then?
The year after, he came back in June, and then you went back to college in September to get another degree. And that was a 3-year course. So we married the next May, and the year after we had our first child. So when he graduated 2 years later, we had the child with us, the son. Yeah,
So how many children do you have?
5.
Five. And what are their names?
Michael, Patrick, Philip, Yanita, and Anthony.
They all live in Canada?
No, the daughter lives in Denver.
And what kind of business, what did they go into? What kind of work did they do?
Well, the oldest boy was a teacher. He just retired. He's going to be 60 pretty soon. And the second one is in the grain business. As a matter of fact, he works for an American company, Budweiser.
he's now the managing
The manager. Barley.
senior barley buyer for Anheuser-Busch in Canada,
The third one is in car business.
automotive.
That's the daughter was a nurse and she married a doctor, and they live in Denver, and they have one son. And the youngest son is also in the grain business as an inspector.
And how many grandchildren do you have?
6.
6 grandchildren.
6.
Any great grandchildren yet?
No, no,
Okay.
not yet.
So, what was you when you went back to college? What were you taking? What were you? Or where did you go to finish up your university?
Completed what I was doing before, and then did the course in economics and others in business.
I thought you took it.
Pardon?
Bachelor of Commerce.
Yeah, Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Commerce.
Okay. And were you going to school too at the time? Or?
No, I didn't work after I had the children.
Okay.
In those days,
Right.
we stayed home.
Okay, let's take a break. I'm going to change tape here right now.
Yeah, when I came back, I was staying with my mother.
Wait just a second.
She passed away very quickly at that time.
Oh, okay. So you say you were staying with your mother, and then but she passed away rather.
Yeah, I lost my parents very young.
Oh.
My dad was 50, my mother was 53.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. And then we got married, so I went to live from Sorel to Ottawa, where he was studying.
Mm-hmm. And so did you buy a house in Ottawa?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what street it was on, or?
Oh, definitely. We lived in a family house that my parents had.
Okay. And So what did you do after you graduated from university then?
I was hired by our Maritime Commission, a government and the Ministry of Transport, responsible for merchant shipping on shipyards.
Okay. So that's, now your dad, he worked for the Maritime Service too, did you say?
Oh yeah, and the Ministry of Transport and Dominion Rec Commissioner, but that was years before.
I know, but did that figure into why you went with them?
The same field, yeah.
Uh-huh. And how long did you work for them?
A few years there, and then they, there had been no exports from 1939 to 50, so suddenly the economics and shipping got bigger, big demand for transportation, so they appointed a transport controller, and I was assigned to his office, and
You were the deputy transport controller.
yeah. And this was transportation of coal, of sulfur, pulpwood, and other goods. But one of the basic ones was grain. And
And this was in Ottawa?
No, then
No.
he sent
Oh.
him to Montreal.
yeah,
Okay.
and from that office I moved to Montreal. And this was quite an experience of transportation of all facets. And then there's a major organization in Canada that oversees the marketing of grain, that's exports and sales, the Canadian Wheat Board. And they hired me, and I opened their office in Montreal in 53, I think.
From 53 to 63.
Yeah. We were there 10 years, and that's...
And then they wanted him to, because the Canadian Wheat Board office is in Winnipeg, so they wanted him to come to Winnipeg and be in charge of shipping,
transportation. And shipping.
transportation. So that's how we came to Winnipeg, and we're still there.
So you live in Winnipeg,
Yeah.
Winnipeggers.
Yes, yes.
And where do you live, and what street do you live on, or what?
It's called Middlegate.
Is it a
It's
gated
very
community?
quiet place close to downtown, but it's the river Assiniboine is going around a sort of a cape, and one street is Westgate, we're Middlegate, and Eastgate, and the river goes around. So that's how they are.
Very special place.
Very nice,
As
yeah.
it turns out, it was
It
ideal.
was good. Still good.
And how long have you been living there in Winnipeg now?
Since 63, so
Oh,
that,
boy,
yeah.
you've been here a long time.
Yeah, a long, long time. Yeah.
And when did you retire? Or have you?
In 88,
Okay.
from the Wheat Board and the government,
Yeah.
and then I was hired by the government, the Canadian government, on a special assignment to do with the trade with the Soviet Union and Russia
And Canada.
in Canada.
Did you have to go to Russia? Did you travel with this?
Yes,
Tell me
quite
about that.
extensively, from first time in 62, the last time in 92, but in between many, many times.
Yeah, but that was with the Wheat Board.
With the Wheat
the
Board,
second
and then,
job.
yeah,
With the-
particularly they bought a lot of grain from us.
Uh-huh. Oh, okay. What was that? Tell me a little bit about that. What were your experiences over there?
Oh, how do we begin on that?
It was good.
Huh?
Your experiences with Russian.
Was it? Did you see a change over like in 30 to however many years? How they dealt with you?
Oh, the dealings, there were no problem. I mean, that we learned a lot from them, and they did from us. They started purchasing small quantities of grain in the late 50s, but particularly in 63, they approached Canada about. They purchased large quantities of grain in that year in '53.
Why were they unable? Why couldn't they produce the grain themselves?
It had more to do with the logistics, I imagine. You know, the country has 10 time zones. And so they were transporting grain, I would imagine, over large areas, over 6,000 miles, 8,000 miles or so, then, and had undertaken to.
Yeah, but couldn't it be that they're
Yeah, logistically, it was a nightmare for them, to such a big country, to take grain.
Yeah, but couldn't it be that their harvest wasn't that good that year? I mean,
Yeah, and as they
So they didn't buy each year. It would vary how much they would buy from Canada. You mean?
the first year they bought over almost 6 million tons. When you consider that above all the other markets that we had, and give priority to that was an enormous amount. Yeah.
So was Canada able to keep up that supply? I mean,
We didn't. We never sold what we couldn't deliver.
Yeah.
Oh, logistically, it turned out to be quite a logistical story. For example, if there were good crops in Romania and Poland, they didn't have facilities to store it, so they would supply it at a different season to Russia on the Russian borders, and Moldavia and the other republics, Lithuania, and then subsequent later in the year, the wheat that we would have, some of it was destined to Poland, to Romania, and to others, into other parts. So there was the logistics of winter crops and spring crops over, and delivering that.
Yeah. And so, did you usually go to Moscow, or where would you go to Russia when you traveled?
Primarily to Moscow. Yeah, the head office was there. And Exports Lab, a very large organization that imports and exports grains from the site.
And did you have any outside hobbies or activities, or do you now, things that you like to do?
You're talking to him?
Both of them, yeah.
Go ahead. So
Well, he golfs.
we golfed, and
We
I
both
did a
golf.
lot of walking and sports, and
Not anymore. Golf.
No.
We bowled, and I was involved with volunteering.
I skated a lot in the winter, and skated up until I was 75, and I still like, but then I was afraid of falling or something someday like that. And I did swimming, bowled a lot. Yeah.
I was involved with the Red Cross Blood Donors Office for 30 years as a volunteer.
On
Now,
a regular basis, you won awards for that. And
I was in charge of the phoners, phoning the donors, and in charge of monthly meetings and things like that. And I brought a lot of people, women, to be phoners and trained them. So I thought that was great. And I haven't done that in the last years because everything has changed in the blood clinics since they had so much trouble with bad blood. And now they have paid phoners, as we were all volunteers, but they can't get volunteers anymore because all the young women are working. They have outside jobs. We didn't, and I always got a lot of very smart secretaries. When they retired, I would get them to work for us. And I'm still involved with being in a guild for the Children's Hospital Foundation,
has done a lot of work.
Research Foundation. So I'm still involved with them. So that's why not why I didn't work, but since I didn't have outside work. I did a lot of that and enjoy that.
Sure. Do you still play golf?
Yeah,
Not so much.
yes, the smaller golf course at the Air Force base that they have one. Prior to that, I belonged to a club and that I golfed at.
In Winnipeg?
Yes.
I see. And now when did you start coming here to the valley, to the desert here?
It-
It's over 25 years ago.
Really? Now how did you come down here, how did you start coming here?
We'd been a few times to San Diego, as that's a great golf place.
Yeah,
And then a very good friend of ours that was visiting here to visit a friend that he had met, so we came up here, celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and we've been coming here pretty well since that time.
Well, when you was working, we used to come for a month,
Uh-huh.
but now we come for longer.
A
Because
lady that we met at that
Right.
time, she had a home for many years in Idlewild, and then down in the valley, so we're going to see her again tomorrow. She'll
Oh,
visit
yeah.
all of those years and other people we've met.
Yeah,
And there were direct flights from Winnipeg at that time.
yeah.
yeah, not anymore.
So do you have a place here? Or
We rent.
you rent?
We rent.
The
yes.
same place all the time, or?
No, we were 10 years at one place, then the owner sold, so we had to find another one, but it's all in the same complex.
Where is that?
In Old Palm Springs.
Near the Canyon Country Club there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's nice. And where did you like to play when you played down here, when you were playing a lot?
Oh, played that Mesquite quite often, and quite a few
Like
others.
Mesquite.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, it had a nice sporting course at that time.
It was nice, nice short. holes.
Okay, before I guess we can wrap this up pretty soon. Have any parting thoughts, either of you? Would like to share?
War is a very sad, awful thing. And I look at all the magazines and all the good kids who did so much because they are kids. And I feel so awful for those who get killed and their families, the orphans, and I pray that it will stop soon. This is so sad.
And of course, there are a lot of young people that are going into harm's way or may sometime. Do you have any advice for someone who ends up in well, let's say a situation like yours where you may be captured, and how best to deal with that?
I'd have to give that some thought. Yeah, I just
I think it's,
yeah, a rapport works out with the guards, particularly with some of the other people. So certainly very careful not to get involved with some people, and there are all kinds at that time.
Yeah.
it seems to me that the Second World War, for the Canadians, the Americans, and all the other troops, the young people who went to war didn't leave a wife, mostly a wife and children. But now you see so many
Yeah.
who leave 2 and 3 children.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is
This is
the big
terrible.
difference. This is, big
Yeah.
difference.
You know, suddenly big.
And they don't
Yeah.
have prisoners really like they used to have in the other war. Like this war, it seems that either they get killed or they come home, or they are.
Yeah, no, there's not.
And today they see so much on TV and movies that they have no idea what the concept, just as well, but that the wars.
It's not the same type of war as the last war.
No.
Oh,
No. Well, especially in Europe, because the Germans and the British and the Canadians, the Americans, all pretty much had the same faith in God and this sort of
yeah.
In the Pacific, it was different because the Japanese, I think it was similar to what it is now, where the culture is so different.
So different.
Yeah,
Whereas
big difference.
in Europe, in the way, same cultural background, so
Right.
so there was some empathy towards even your enemy. Where
But the suffering, some of those countries like Poland, I went for Europe.
oh,
But they suffered, and then the Russians.
well, that right.
The first time I went to Moscow in '62, in the region of Moscow, there were 6 million war widows.
They were all employed
Yeah.
by the government in
Yeah,
museums.
amazing.
And,
How they coped with all of that, and they built.
because they didn't believe in giving them a pension and stay home and do nothing. So they had to have a little job somewhere. Yeah, that was not such a
Amazing,
bad
yeah.
idea.
No, not such a bad idea.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your service indirectly to our country and
Yeah,
to
thank you.
Canada, and thanks for coming and sharing with us.